Alright, so more talks about the calendar. Well, I suppose where I want to take it now is the time wave, Terence McKenna's time wave. Because I feel as if this whole issue of creating your own calendar could add a new perspective to the time wave. And I mean it in the sense that, okay, so in the past I had talked about how the time wave, I think, maybe we shouldn't interpret it as a linear thing necessarily that's heading towards omega point, but instead as a sort of circle, but not a circle that's just repeating, not like a loop of the same experiences again and again, but a loop in the sense that omega point is in the center of a mandala. That is, the eschaton I interpret as being maybe the present moment, and that in like a Buddhist way we are disconnected from the present moment by our awareness. That is to say, we aren't disconnected from the present moment, we are completely one with the present moment, but our monkey mind kind of creates the illusion of separation, which creates suffering. So that, you know, you could read the whole Terence McKenna thing in a Buddhist way, in that simply, or not simply, but, you know, you need to reach the present moment, even though you're already there. That's the Zen paradox of it, right? That you need to get there, even though you already are there. And that this projection of your journey towards a place where you already are is, well, what we stylize in the form of many kind of religious quests, the hero's journey, and so on. There are these quests towards somewhere where you already are. At the end of the hero's journey, you always sort of return back to where you started, and in the same way, I would suggest that maybe the time wave is something that returns to the eschaton. Of course, again, the fact that the hero's journey returns to where it started doesn't mean, I don't interpret it as being like a loop in time where you get back to the beginning and then it all starts again. Because, as Philip K. Dick said, there are different timelines and there are different vectors of time, it seems. You could, for instance, be in that loop that's going down into the underworld and then up again. And that loop itself could be on a different timeline in which it like gets smaller, for instance. So that maybe you are going on a loop, on the same loop, but maybe the loop itself is getting smaller and smaller so that your journey around the loop is different, or all sorts of other kind of variants on that. Another possibility is that the hero's journey, what we consider to be the hero's journey, and of course its associations to shamanism, how all of this, I mean, Terence McKenna's time wave, the way it's associated to shamanism, could have something to do with healing. So that it's an experience that you go through when you are hurt and need healing. It's not like a description of the metaphysical foundations of time. It's that when something in your organism, psychic and physical, needs healing, you undergo a sort of a dark night of the soul, which then brings you back to where you were but had forgotten that you are. And that if this process is successful, then you have healed. You have healed in whatever relative measure you needed to heal. Again, not necessarily in some sort of an absolute metaphysical kind of healing. So, kind of what happens with recurring dreams as well, which are a loop that you find yourself stuck in. But when does the loop end? It ends precisely when the issue that is being talked about in the loop gets resolved, acknowledged, integrated, whatever it may be. So that's the funny thing about time. I don't think that time is, I don't think it makes sense to say that time is circular or that it is linear. I feel as if it has different functions depending on where you find yourself, kind of thing. So in that sense, I suppose I am saying that I think time depends a lot on the individual. And that doesn't mean that time is subjective. That's the weird thing. I think that time is a very objective thing, but that it changes form. Your relationship to it and its relationship to you change. Something along those lines. Anyway, but so Terence McKenna's time wave. I was discussing in that earlier video how it could have something to do with this loop-like quality that hones in on the present moment, right? But this idea of a personal calendar I find very interesting, even though I didn't really manage to explain it very well in the last video. But I see it as in the conventional calendar, you are sort of surrounded by these dates. You could imagine a circle going around you with winter, autumn, spring, summer, all of the seasons sort of around you in 4 quadrants, and then all of the months divided around you. And you could imagine that being in the conventional calendar, in the calendar we use in the West, is a circle like that that's constantly going around you. And the measures, how big each month is, how long each month lasts and so on, is the same as everyone else's. And then you can imagine fleeing from that, escaping into another calendar, simply by imagining a lunar calendar, which is still a culturally shared calendar, but maybe, a less common one. And you can imagine that, if you were to consider a month to be a lunar cycle, then the months would be out of phase with mainstream culture. Your months, the circle that surrounds you, would be a circle that is slightly different and faster or slower than the mainstream circle. And so you would, because our entire physical world is kind of not based, but it depends on the calendar in a certain way. The fact that we call Monday Monday and Tuesday Tuesday carries with it symbolic implications. That Mondays are Mondays. They have a certain symbolic character to them. And you will have your own personal associations to what Mondays mean for you, and your family will, and then your bigger group of friends will, and your city will, and your country will, and then the earth might. That Monday carries a certain meaning, a lot of different meanings. But if suddenly you kind of have your own little week, your own set of temporal signposts that maybe have a meaning that overpowers the meaning of the conventional calendar. Well, sort of two things, I suppose. First of all, as I said in the last video, I think it, like the shaman, it allows you to exist in between two worlds, or to be able to see the external world from a new perspective. It allows you to see the world as an outsider, which is the position of the shaman. And that's, of course, why Terence McKenna said that all of this kind of work is inherently alienating, because you are going deeper and deeper towards your own individual experience of life, and so you are going to share that with no one. The deeper you go into it, the more it's going to be just your individual experience, and you're going to find yourself in a calendar that only you have, in a coordinate of space-time that only you understand, however you want to interpret what is happening to you, your experience. And so it is an isolating experience, and like shamanism, from that isolation you see the shared world without being in it as much, maybe, and that then allows you to see things in it that maybe are invisible, and return back into the shared world to share them with people. That's the kind of the funny final stage of shamanism. It would be almost like a fish coming out of the sea, and from a bird's-eye view, seeing that there are patches of oil on the surface of the water, which you couldn't see from underneath, and therefore knowing that, oh, we should move to another area of the ocean because this area is polluted. Like, you wouldn't see that if you were completely engrossed in living in the sea. So that's one side of this, that it allows for a deeper communion with your own individual experience. But the other thing, of course, is not simply that it puts you in contact with your own experience, but that it makes you see the calendar as a symbolic thing. As a synchronicity, and the way it recurs through time can potentially make you see that if what you are experiencing, i.e. synchronicity, has so much symbolic power to it, and yet it seems to be forming something around you that is akin to a calendar, then you can kind of reverse engineer that and look at the calendar, the shared calendar, and say, you can kind of start seeing how symbolic the structure of time and space that we live in is. And this is both pertinent to Philip K. Dick and Terence McKenna. For Philip K. Dick, the whole idea, I think, was that the world didn't actually move in time for him in the way that we usually understand it, or at least that wasn't of such great importance. Time happened in the sense that, first you're having coffee and then you're like washing the dishes. Like there is some time has happened between those two things, but that Philip K. Dick liked to see it more as if, yes, there is that kind of linear time, but at the same time, we're constantly in the present moment, and the present moment, we're constantly in the same event, the same kind of place, temporally. It's just that place is changing shape. So the way he would see it is that, for him, we were constantly trapped in the Roman Empire. So he would imagine that the the shapes of things in our culture, the way that now we have cinemas and cars and all that, were basically just like redecorations or skin mods, like in a video game, of the original video game, which was the Roman Empire. And yeah, I think that there are certain strands in, I don't know, sociology or whatever, that would agree with that and would say that yes, we are essentially the same kind of, we have the same culture in a lot of ways, and have had the same culture in simple ways, in that we use vehicles to move, but instead of them being horses, it's cars. Or that, you could find a lot of ways to say, yes, okay, I understand what he's talking about. This is just essentially the same world. It's just that we haven't sort of changed in some sort of an alien species. We essentially still are the same kind of human beings that we were in the past, but with different kind of skins. But I think what Philip K. Dick meant more than that, although that was included in the analysis, is that we are literally in the Roman Empire. But Philip K. Dick tended to see this as the Roman Empire being the real-time location, that we actually were in the Roman Empire, and that therefore all other skin mods were fake. They were cover-ups, right? That if you were seeing a car, it wasn't really a car, it was a horse carriage. Or that if you were seeing a big block of modern apartment buildings, that wasn't what it was. So that it's not simply that we were living in an age that had the spirit of the Roman Empire in it, but that the physical world was the Roman Empire itself, kind of thing. So that for him there was a timeline that was not the timeline of linear time, which tracked the morphing of the physical shapes of the world from Roman Empire to our current state. And even beyond that, I mean, he then develops it to say that no, actually the Roman Empire isn't the original state. The original state is, what he calls the palm tree garden, something akin to heaven, to a sort of traditional idea of heaven on earth. But that, therefore, the Roman Empire and all other subsequent historical shapes are distortions of that, or veils that cover that. And these veils change, but they're essentially always the same, so that you always find yourself in the present moment. You're always trapped in the same moment of time. Or, maybe more adequately, it's like a recurring nightmare. What I was saying about recurring dreams, it's as if you're constantly trapped in the same loop, and you don't realize it. And this loop is a loop whose character is the character of being oppressed by some kind of a prison. So it's not like a still frame, it's a moment, it's a loop that has a certain character to it, like a dream. And it's always the same kind of dream, be it 2018 or, the 17th century or whatever, that it's always the same dream. It's just that the characters change clothes and so on. And that, like with the recurring nightmares, and this here is my interpretation, like a recurring nightmare, in order to exit it, you need to somehow bring it to awareness. You need to bring to awareness the fact that the metastructure, you need to see behind the curtain kind of thing.